You stare at the blank wall of your new room, the silence cutting through you like a blade. This wasn't how you imagined your life would be. Married to a stranger, a man whose name was John Jungkook, someone you barely knew beyond his sharp features and quiet nature. This wasn't love, it was a compromise, a decision made by your parents, a decision that ripped your world apart. You had someone, a man who made you believe in forever, but your parents didn't approve. He was from a different country, and to them, love wasn't enough to build a life. You fought, pleaded, and cried, but in the end, they broke you and him apart, leaving behind nothing but shattered dreams. And then there was Jungkook, the perfect son, the obedient one. He too had someone, a woman he called his first love, but his parents disapproved, claiming she was infertile. They didn't even tell him, they just acted secret tests and lies disguised as concern. When both of your worlds fell apart, your parents decided to fix everything by tying you two together. It wasn't love, it wasn't even hate, it was indifference. You can take the bed, I'll sleep on the couch. Jungkook said, his voice carried no emotion. You nodded, not even sparing him a glance. You didn't hate him, how could you? He was just as much a victim as you were. The first week of your marriage was a nightmare, not because Jungkook was rude or harsh. No, he was the perfect gentleman, too perfect in fact. His politeness felt like a barrier, a wall he had built between the two of you. He always stayed in the guest room, and the two of you barely spoke unless it was necessary. The silence was almost unbearable, but neither of you knew how to break it. One evening, you found yourself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. Jungkook walked in, loosening his tie as he placed his briefcase on the counter. Do you need help? He asked, standing awkwardly by the door. You looked up surprised. Sure. Can you stir the soup? He nodded and moved to the stove, picking up the ladle. For a moment, the two of you worked in silence, the only sounds coming from the bubbling soup and the rhythmic chopping of your knife. So, how was work? You asked, trying to make small talk. It was fine, he replied shortly. Yours? Same. The conversation died as quickly as it started, but then, as he stirred the soup, Jungkook spoke again. You don't have to cook every day, you know. We can order it if it's easier. You paused, looking at him. It was a small gesture, but it felt considerate. It's fine. Cooking helps me think. He nodded, and for a moment you thought you saw a flicker of something in his eyes, understanding maybe. But just as quickly he turned back to the stove, and the moment passed. While Jungkook was gone to change his clothes, you were setting the table for dinner when the doorbell rang. Wiping your hands on the apron, you walked to open the door. To your surprise, it was Mrs. John, Jungkook's mother, standing there with a handbag slung over her arm and a familiar sharpness in her eyes. Mrs. John, I didn't know you were coming. You greeted, stepping aside to let her in. I thought I would drop by to check on how my children are doing, she said, stepping inside without hesitation. Her gaze swept across the house, taking in the quiet ambience. Where's Jungkook? He's upstairs, you said softly, shutting the door. He just got back from work. Mrs. John hummed, clearly unimpressed by her vague answer. And how are you? You hesitated. I'm fine. Before you could say more, she pointed towards the guest room down the hall. I need to leave a few things there. Is this still the guest room? Your heart sank. Yes, but it's not necessary. She ignored you, briskly walking to the room. You followed behind her, your pulse quickening. The moment she opened the door, her sharp eyes took in the room. A neat bed, Jungkook's books on the side table, his watch lying on the dresser. Her expression tightened. So this is where he's been staying? She said, turning to you. Before you could answer, Jungkook appeared at the door, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. He took one look at his mother's face and sighed. Oma, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, she said, crossing her arms. Why is this your room? You're married, you're supposed to share a room with your wife. Jungkook glanced at you, his jaw already tight. Mom, please. It's been months since the wedding. What kind of marriage is this? Are you still treating each other like strangers? She said, cutting him in the middle. Umma, Jungkook said firmly, his tone growing sharper. This isn't something you can control. I'm not trying to control it, but you can't expect me to stay quiet when my son is making a mockery of this marriage. This isn't a mockery. Oh, enough. She cut him off, raising a hand. Clearly, you two need some help. I'm staying here tonight, and you two will sleep in the same room together. Your eyes widened, panic creeping into your chest. Mrs. John, it's not necessary. It absolutely is. And while we are on the subject, when I'm going to get a grandchild? Your face flushed. Excuse me? You heard me, she said, looking pointedly at both of you and Jungkook. It's time to start thinking about your future. Or were you planning to avoid that too? Jungkook stepped closer, his voice tight with frustration. Umma, enough. This is between me and her. You can't keep interfering. Mrs. John raised an eyebrow, her expression calm but unyielding. Fine, but I'm not leaving tonight, and I expect you both to act like a married couple. With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving the two of you standing in awkward silence. Later that evening, you found yourself standing in the master bedroom, staring at the bed where you had been sleeping all alone, but you would now have to share it with Jungkook. This wasn't how I planned to end my day. You mumbled half to yourself. Jungkook stood by the door, his hands shoved into his pockets. You don't have to worry, I'll sleep on the floor. You turned to him. You don't have to. The bed is big enough for both of us, and your mom will probably check in on us. He hesitated, his gaze flickered to the bed before nodding. All right, but I'll keep to my side. You nodded, grateful for his understanding. As the two of you settled into bed that night, the silence was visible. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't easy either. Your mom really doesn't hold back, does she? You said quietly, breaking the silence. Jungkook let out a soft chuckle. She's always been like that. I'm sorry she put you on the spot. It's not your fault, you said, staring at the ceiling. It's just hard pretending everything is fine when it's not. Jungkook didn't respond immediately, and when he finally spoke, his voice was softer than you had ever heard it. Yeah, it is. There was silence again, a long silence until Jungkook sensed something. He turned his face towards you only to see tears sliding down from the corner of your eyes. His chest tightened with worry. Ryan, are you okay? You quickly wiped your cheek, realizing too late that tears had already escaped your eyes. I'm fine. You lied, your voice betrayed you with its shakiness. You turned away, desperate to hide your face. But Jungkook wasn't convinced. He placed the blanket down and approached you cautiously, kneeling in front of you. You are crying, he said softly, his tone filled with concern. What's wrong? You shook your head, biting your lip to hold back a sob. Nothing. It's nothing. But the pain in your chest wouldn't stay hidden. The ache of betrayal, the loss of the love you once thought was yours, and the crushing reality of being trapped in a marriage neither of you wanted. It all came spilling out. I'm sorry, Jungkook said suddenly, his voice thick with guilt. I'm sorry for everything, for what happened to you, for this marriage. None of this is fair to you. You looked at him then, your tears blurred his face. It's not your fault. It's not even about you. My own parents, they never understood me. They never cared about what I wanted, what made me happy. I just wanted a simple, happy life. I wanted to marry the man I loved, have a family. Your voice cracked and Jungkook's expression twisted with something unspoken. Empathy, perhaps, or regret. He reached out as if to comfort you but stopped himself midway, his hand hanging awkwardly in the air before he withdrew it. I didn't want this either, he said quietly, his eyes dropping to the floor. I wanted something different too, someone else. Your heart clenched, but you didn't blame him. You already knew. You loved her, didn't you? He nodded slowly. I did, but it doesn't matter now. She's gone, and he hesitated, his hand clenching into fist. There's something I need to tell you. You frowned, wiping your face as you looked at him. What is it? He exhaled shakily as if bracing himself for the impact of his own words. This marriage, it wasn't just about you or me. It was planned, forced. He looked up at you, his gaze full of guilt. My parents, they arranged this because they found out she couldn't have children. They wanted me to marry someone better, someone they thought could give them the heir they wanted. You stared at him, stunned into silence. He continued, his voice breaking as he spoke. They did it behind my back, ran tests on her without my knowledge, and then pressured me into this marriage when she left. I didn't even know until after everything had fallen apart. His words hit you like a punch to the gut. The betrayal of it all twisted the knife deeper into your chest. And my parents? You asked, your voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, but his silence told you everything you needed to know. Your breath hitched as the realization dawned on you. They were a part of it, weren't they? They didn't care about me either. They just wanted control. Jungkook finished bitterly. They wanted to control us, our lives, our futures. You let out a shaky laugh, but it was void of any humor. So we are both just pawns in their game. He looked at you, his gaze full of pain and regret. I didn't want to tell you, but I couldn't keep lying to you. You deserve to know the truth, and you deserve to decide what you want to do. The room fell silent, the weight of his confession pressing down on you both. Tears streamed on your face, but this time you didn't bother to hide them. Jungkook watched you, his own eyes glassy as if your pain mirrored his own. We can't keep living like this, pretending everything is fine when it's not. Jungkook looked at you as you spoke. What do you suggest we do? We make them pay. They think they can control our lives, manipulate us like puppets. It's time we show them they can't. He stared at you, your words igniting a fire within him. I'm in. The next few weeks were a roller coaster of confrontations and revelations. Together, you and Jungkook planned to confront your parents, exposing their lies and manipulations. It wasn't easy. Tears and moments when you both felt like giving up. But through it all, Jungkook was your rock. He stood by you, supported you, and gave you strength when you felt like you had none left. And somewhere along the way, something unexpected happened. You started to care for him. It wasn't sudden, like a lightning strike. It was gradual, like the slow bloom of a flower. The way he smiled at you, the way he listened to you, the way he made you feel like you weren't alone anymore. It all chipped away at the walls around your heart. The first real conversation happened on a rainy evening. The two of you were stuck inside due to the downpour, and the power had gone out. You sat on opposite sides of the living room, the only light coming from a single lamp. I used to love the rain, you said softly, breaking the silence. Jungkook looked up, surprised by your words. Why used to? You hesitated, the memories flooding back. Because it reminds me of him. He didn't need to ask who you meant, he simply nodded. She used to love the rain too. The unspoken understanding between you felt heavier than the storm outside. Do you think they are happier now, without us? Jungkook didn't answer right away. He leaned back, staring in front. Maybe, or maybe they are just as broken as we are. You didn't reply. What was there to say? The day had finally come. You and Jungkook had spent many nights talking and planning how to confront your parents. It wasn't just about walking away, it was about making them understand how deeply they had hurt you both. When you entered your parents' house, the tension was heavy in the air. Jungkook walked beside you, his presence steady like a silent promise that he wouldn't let you face this alone. Ah, you two are here, your mother said with a fake smile. How's married life going? When are we hearing good news? You exchanged a quick glance with Jungkook before stepping forward. We are not here for small talk. We need to talk about something important. Both of your parents frowned. What is this about? Jungkook placed a file on the table with a loud thud. This, all of this. Your parents exchanged nervous looks. Jungkook's voice was cold and sharp as he continued. These are the medical reports you secretly ordered about my ex-girlfriend. You tested her without my permission, found out she couldn't have children, and then used that to ruin our relationship and force me into this marriage. Your mother's face turned pale. We did it for you, Jungkook. She wasn't good for you. You deserve a family and she couldn't give you that. Your chest tightened with anger as you spoke again. And what about me? You forced me to leave the man I loved because he was from another country. You made me feel guilty for wanting my own happiness. You told me this marriage was for my own good, but it was all a lie. His father crossed his arms. We are your parents. We know what's best for you. Jungkook's jaw tightened and his voice rose, anger lacing every word. Do you? Because it doesn't seem like it. All I see are parents who care more about their reputation than their children's happiness. You didn't care about me. You didn't care about her. You only cared about controlling us. Your parents flinched, but they didn't say anything. You stepped closer, your voice trembling but steady. You never understood me. You never even tried to. You lied to me, manipulated me, and now I'm stuck in this mess because of you. I didn't want this. I wanted a simple, happy life with someone I loved, but you ruined that. Marriage is about compromise. His mother said, though her voice was shaky. No, Jungkook said, his tone was sharp. Marriage is about trust, respect, and love. You gave us none of those things. You treated us like pawns in your plans, and we are done with it. Your mother's eyes filled with tears. You can't just walk away from your family. We did what we thought was right. You shook your head, tears streaming down your face. What you thought was right ruined our lives. Family doesn't do what you did. Family supports and loves each other. You didn't. We are cutting ties, Jungkook said firmly. We are walking away from you, from this toxic control. We are going to live our lives on our own terms. Mr. John's face turned red with anger. You think you can just abandon us after everything we have done for you? You didn't do it for us. You did it for yourselves, and yes, we are leaving. We deserve better. Without another word, you turned and walked out the door, Jungkook right behind you. Your parents called after you. Their voices filled the anger and desperation, but you didn't look back. Outside, you stopped and took a deep breath. The air felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from your chest. Jungkook looked at you, his eyes soft. Are you okay? He asked gently. You nodded, wiping away a tear. I think so. For the first time, I feel free. Jungkook gave you a small smile. Me too. Standing there together, you realized something important. You weren't alone in this. Despite everything, you had each other. And maybe, just maybe, you could build a life that was truly yours. The turning point came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. You were both sitting on the couch, watching a movie neither of you was really paying attention to. I don't think they're coming back, you said suddenly, your voice trembling. Jungkook turned to you, his eyes searching yours. What do you mean? Our exes, I think they have moved on, and maybe we should too. He didn't respond right away, but you could see the conflict in his eyes. I still think about her sometimes, but it's not the same anymore. It's different and it can never be the same. You nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Me too. For the first time, you felt like you were truly on the same page.